Hello, and welcome to me reading someone's favourite books. It's become one of my favourite series I've ever done. I'm very excited for the person that we're doing today, which is, as you can tell by the title and thumbnail, etc., Kieran from KDBooks, a man who has simultaneously raised my awareness of the Booker Prize whilst also diminishing my respect for Welsh people. Kieran is someone who has really changed my opinion on what Welsh people can be. You know, in England we have terrible archetypes of like sheep fuckers. And in fact, Kieran has shown me that that's not the case. Welsh people are way worse than that. Kieran has proven himself to be probably the biggest asset to Wales as a country since the lead singer of Lost Pro. All jokes aside though, Kieran was one of the original people around on my channel. He was absolutely lovely. He really made me feel part of the community. He was just lovely, and he's always been lovely. He is the type of person that will reach out at any stage, no matter what size you are, and will be exactly the same with anyone. And he is incredibly polite, incredibly lovely, incredibly demented, incredibly worrying. I receive a lot of weird voice notes from him, but you know, that's part of the charm. On all of my books that I've bought since starting BookTube, I don't think there's any one person that has had as much influence on the books that I've bought other than Kieran. I have bought a lot of books based purely on Kieran's recommendation. When I see them somewhere, I'll be like, oh, Kieran spoke about this book, I should get it. I may not have read them, but I have bought the books based on his opinion. So this is why it's so important to do this today, because I feel like the time's due. It was always bound to happen, and so I reached out to Kieran and I asked for 3 of his favourite books. And as I was going to give the criteria of which 3 books to say, I think he got so excited and started spamming me that he didn't read the idea that there were different criterias. So instead, these are just 3 of his favourite books. One of them is a mystery. He sent me it, which was incredibly lovely as well. That's another reason Kieran's lovely. I'm going to pick up the first book, which is... This is, once again, all of these Kieran has videos for. He has a video, well, I don't know about the last one, I assume he does, but he definitely has it on this and the second book. I've never heard of Sarah Kane. I have never read Sarah Kane. It's the reason I reached out to him was because I got this from a charity shop based on, once again, hearing him talk about how much he loved Sarah Kane, how much he loved her plays. I saw that he sent this to, I believe, Anna Wallace-Johnson as well, if I remember. This is one I'm very excited to get to because I only recently started reading plays like last year, as in with outside of being at school or uni, and I have thoroughly enjoyed them. And so this seems like a great chance to find someone that could be a new favourite. I have no idea about anything going into it, what any of them are about, so I will explain as I go, and that's the most I can say about this right now. Well, here we are. What a journey it's been. The first thing you're thinking is, this wasn't where you were before. And that's very astute of you. You're going places, kid. Probably been a month since I started reading these books, and I finished probably a week ago, and then travelling wise, didn't have time to film. So we're coming at this from a hazy but clear place. And the first thing to say about Sarah Kane is, what the hell did I read, Kieran? That was one of the most wild things I've ever read. I'm loading up what I said. My review was, this is the most depraved, filthy, disgustingly riveting, incredible collection of work I've ever read. This whole collection is worth reading just for 448 Psychosis alone, and that is 100% true. So there are 6 plays in this, and they are all absolutely cesspits of the most depraved actions I've ever read in my entire life. So that to give an example, I'm not going to go through all 6 plays because that will take an age. I would like to point out that when I said to Kieran to choose me 3 novels, I've ended up reading 4 novels, because technically it's Nicola trilogy, which is 3, maybe you count as novellas, whatever, but that's 4 novels and 6 plays. So how did that happen? How did I hear those options and go, that's what I asked? Nevertheless, the first play in this collection, Blasted, apparently the Daily Mail reviewed as disgusting piece of filth, which is pretty mad. Ow! Someone's sawing outside, so I've closed the windows, you may still hear it. But it's an imagined war in Leeds, civil war, and it's these two people alone in a hotel room, and yeah, it's just about the most raw, base, despicable actions that people can do. The man is racist, sexist, the worst human being to possibly ever exist. I don't know how to describe it. I don't know how to describe any of these other than read them. They are incredible, despite the fact that they are appalling. And 448 Psychosis is the last one I'm going to talk about out in particular. 448 Psychosis takes place in... It has no identifying characters, it has no character names, it has what is essentially just a free-form poem in a sense, and there are two kind of aspects to the play. One is a conversation between a patient inside of a ward to their doctor, and then the other half is the internal thoughts of the patient as they know that they're going to kill themselves. And it's this brutal, gorgeous writing that I read it out loud to my housemate. Like, I typically do this, is that if I'm sat with my housemate as he's playing a game or something, I'll read what I'm reading because it helps me get into the flow for being at university or something where I know I have to read out loud. This was so perfect. It was one of the most gorgeously structured and maintained and put together pieces of work that every word just felt so easy as you read it out loud, and it was so easy to capture the emotion because it's so visceral on the page. It was brilliant. It was absolutely brilliant. And there's a tragic, morbid fascination with it, in the sense that Sarah Kane wrote this, I believe, like months before she committed suicide in a ward. Yeah, there is a morbid fascination in reading it and feeling that you're capturing someone's inner essence in that moment. It was heartbreaking. It was truly a difficult read, but a brilliant one. So that is Sarah Kane. I would 100% recommend reading Sarah Kane. I gave it 4 stars overall because it's brilliant, but it is disgusting. Book number 2 is one that I've wanted to read for a very long time, and the only reason I haven't is because of how long it is. Normally I read a big fantasy book and then put smaller contemporary reads alongside them. So when it comes to larger contemporary fiction or literary fiction or whatever, it becomes difficult when it's a larger book. I find myself not going to those as much. Salman Rushdie's Midnight's Children has been a book that I have wanted to read for a very, very, very long time based on his opinion. This is the winner of the Booker's Booker, so they took the Booker's Victory Prize of the last 50 years, and then they did they picked out of those, and this is the book that won. I'm just going to read the description on the back because I feel like it's a vintage copy. This has been out for a while. They should have ironed out a fucking solid blurb. So it says, born at the stroke of midnight at the exact moment of India's independence, Salim Sinai is a special child. However, this coincidence of birth has consequences he is not prepared for. Telepathic powers connect him with 1,000 other Midnight's children, all of whom are endowed with unusual gifts. Inextricably linked to his nation, Salim's story is a whirlwind of disasters and triumphs that mirrors the course of modern India at its most impossible and glorious. So it's magical realism. It's magical realism about the partition of India. This is a very interesting period in history, especially as a British person, knowing the colonial relevancy and the colonial threads that hang over this. It's an important read as well. It is an important part of history to learn about and feel have the responsibility for. And so as a result, I am beyond excited to get to this. And so yeah, we'll see what happens with this. Midnight's Children. Here we are. Long awaited for me. I've been wanting to read Salman Rushdie for a very long time, as I said. and I can give you my absolute review here. My review was, wow, okay, well, okay, wow, yup, well. That was my review. There's no other words to put into that. It is brilliant. I will say that I very much enjoyed the first 2/3, and then something massive happens, and the last third feels like it should have ended already, or maybe like 100 pages before when you reach the end. There is very much a climactic finish, and then an extra 200 pages or 100 pages or something. And so you deal with that what you like. It was brilliant. I have never read an author quite so much where I was appreciating their use of punctuation. You know, that's when you know a piece of writing is impeccable. When I was just reading sentences and I couldn't help. Normally I just blast through sentences. I don't actually pay attention to punctuation that much. This one, it changed the cadence of how you read a sentence. It changed how it settled in your mind, how each character was versus each other. That's one thing that it is immaculately written. It has a incredible thematic work. It has incredible concepts, incredible narrator voice. The sense that because this is following what seems like a linear plot chronologically, in the sense that it is following the build-up and afterwards of the partition of India. Instead, we're reading it from the perspective of a narrator who jumps around, that purposely it makes it such a dense read and slow read, because you're having moments where they're like, well, this happened. No, I can't say it happened like this. I have to give a specific. So it happened at this time. I need to give more than that though. So this person was involved, and it's such a long, drawn out experience that really connects you to that central character that you're reading from the perspective from, and it helps you see how that character is formed through looking back at their history and their ancestors' history, because this is an intergenerational story. You begin with their grandfather and you end up with them, and you're following the family line. And it was, once again, a stellar piece of writing. The idea of rebirth, be it through characters or the country itself, conflict, prejudice, colonialism, it deals with so much. And the concept of rebirth, of course, is constant, because that's the visualization, is the rebirth of a country, and the good and the bad and the messy of those. I know I should say ugly, but you know. But messy is the key word I would use, is that I can imagine a lot of people being very frustrated with the narrator style, very frustrated with the story, very frustrated with everything. But what this book does fantastically is the concept of the influence of history, the influence on who is telling a story, why you view a certain historical event the way it is based on who is telling the story. We have the central character admit that they are making mistakes in how they are recounting the story. Factual things are not lining up, dates are not lining up, and instead this book isn't trying to tell you the story of the partition of India. This book is trying to capture the feeling of confusion and conflict and fear and having no control that there is at the time, that everyone was so malleable and had to be open to being moved about and being pushed around and taking advantage of people when they could to get a leg up. It's all about just the feeling of not being in control, and the narrator does a fantastic job of conveying that through how the story is structured. And that's how I describe it. Is I thought going into this would be a lot more tight in terms of how it approaches history, but instead, like I said, this book, and I believe it was Emil in my Discord put it perfectly, in the sense that this captures the time rather than the events. And it still does capture events, but it does it in a way where facts aren't essential. I gave it 4 stars again. This is another 4 stars. They're both brilliant 4 stars, but there's just that little bit, like the last third of this book did unfortunately lower it. I'm nervous. 3rd book. Oh, did I show my address? I hope I didn't. I'm gonna have to blur that out if I showed my address. What a dick. Nevertheless, here we go. It broke off. This could be a meme, you know. It feels. Oh, all right. I haven't looked at it. As you can see, it's still in the box. But from the feel of it, that feels to me like a Fitzcarraldo edition book. It feels like one of those blue boys. That's my guess right now. It feels like it's quite chunky. It feels like possibly about 400 pages. What's happening? All right. Okay. I love this. First things off the bat, I'm going to have to learn how to pronounce this. But the first thing I have to say, without a doubt, is this is fucking awesome. The thinner, taller... This is a cool edition of a book. Like, this is my Minor Detail, which is a traditional sized UK book. Whereas this is like a mass market paperback size, and I fucking love it. First things first, thank you very much, Kieran. This is... I don't know how to pronounce it. Fuck me. You can read it. I'm going to learn how to pronounce everything on there, because I don't want to make an absolute fool of myself. If I was going to guess, I'd say it's the Nokilla trilogy by Augustin Fernandez Marlowe, translated by Thomas Bunstead. Oh, this is exciting. This says, one of the most daring literary experiments of the 21st century, Augustin Fernandez Marlowe's Nokilla trilogy takes the form of literary channel surfing, presenting multiple narratives of people and places that reflect the digital age. The globe-spanning stories that explore across the trilogy take us from a lone poplar tree in the Nevada desert to an abandoned hotel in Sardinia, full of references to indie cinema, theoretical physics, conceptual art, practical architecture, the history of computers, and the decadence of the novel. Nokilla Trilogy charts a hidden, exhilarating cartography of contemporary experience, bringing our hyper-connected world ever sharper into focus. That sounds very interesting. Whoa, this looks so interesting. So it's like a series of vignettes from the looks of it. It looked like 2-page excerpts at most in some places. So it does seem like vignettes of dotting in and out, as they said, channel surfing. I have no idea what to expect from this. I love it. Talking about judging a book based on its cover, this is great. 10 out of 10 already. So we're going to go into it. We're going to see what we think. Thank you very much, Kieran. The Nokilla trilogy. I'm reading this last, but this was actually the first one I read. My review for this on Goodreads was 4 stars, so every book is 4 stars. I most certainly am too dumb and don't understand the context for a lot of the literary figures quoted throughout this trilogy. Nevertheless, this is a fascinating, unravelling book that slowly spirals out, expanding on its themes to culminate in a deeply satisfying ending. A lot of fantastic quotes and anecdotes to use to impress in the future. And that is what I would definitely stick with. These are 3 basically novellas. They're basically novella length, translated from Spanish. And like I said, they are basically vignettes, as the blurb describes, channel surfing. The book is way more disconnected in terms of the actual plots than I was anticipating. I thought that things would actually culminate together. They don't. If you want to read something that starts off separate and concludes together, you're not getting that here. These truly are disconnected stories with slight overlaps, but barely, that have thematic overlaps. The book is constantly building themes. This is not a book for plot. This is not a book for those that need a plot to go through or characters to go through. This is very much you're reading context and quotes, and you're building up an understanding as you go along, because it's meant to symbolize and visualize the internet, where you're having to dig through all this information that some of it may not be worthwhile, some of it may be worthwhile, but you won't know that until later in life when you're doing something else. All of these things interweave with each other, and provide context for later on or before, and you have to put that head work together of connecting the dots to find any pleasure in reading it. Like, all of them are interesting anecdotes separately, but to get something out of it, you really have to dig into this one and spend some time on it. So here we've got, in the middle of Nevada desert stands a solitary poplar tree covered in hundreds of pairs of shoes. Farther along Route 50, a lonely prostitute falls in love with a collector of found photographs. In Las Vegas, an Argentine man builds a peculiar monument to George Louis Borges. On the run from the authorities, Kenny takes up permanent residence in the legal non-place of Singapore International Airport, while the novelists Enrique Vilas Matas and Augustin Fernandez Marlowe encounter each other on an oil rig. So you can already see here how disconnected everything is. And whilst all of these have connections via thematics or slight crossovers that provide context, it's not that all of these come together. I don't really know how to describe this. It fascinated me, it confused me, it made me want to read a lot of different things that are quoted throughout this. Like, I've now bought a Borges's, I don't know whether that's how you pronounce it, but I bought a Borges's short story to know whether I want to read more. So this book has provided, probably would be way better on a reread once I have context for all these things. That's it. They're the 3 books I read. When you asked for 3 novels, ended up with 4 and 6 plays, but they were overall really fantastic. Gave all of them 4 stars, purely for little niggles, little problems, but it's fantastic. Thank you very much, Kieran, once again, for being nice of you to send me the book, and I do truly appreciate that. You've disturbed me. I expected it. I mean, it's not like I went into it not expecting it. But Sarah Kane, it's like the most beautiful crime you've ever seen. It's like being fascinated by someone who's made artwork out of dead animals. You know, there's a visceral, disturbing quality to it. But if someone's transformed it into art, there's still a part of you that's like, whoa, oh, you know, you're messed up, dude. But I love you.